In just 39 seconds, one of Britain's most beloved actors was thrown off live television in a clash so heated, so explosive, that the cameras nearly stopped rolling. What started as a friendly chat turned into a screaming match that left the host red-faced, the guest storming off set, and millions of viewers absolutely stunned by what they just witnessed. Before we dive into this absolute car crash of an interview, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Britain's darkest scandals, the confrontations they don't want you to see, and the moments that make breakfast television anything but boring. Last night, Sir Ian McKellen walked onto the Lorraine Kelly show, expecting a pleasant conversation about his latest theater production. What he got instead was an ambush that would end with him ripping off his microphone and walking straight out of the studio, leaving Lorraine Kelly speechless and scrambling to explain what had just happened. The morning had started normally enough. Ian McKellen, dressed impeccably in a navy suit, walked onto the bright yellow sofa set with his trademark warm smile. Lorraine Kelly greeted him with her usual Scottish charm, and for the first few minutes, everything seemed perfectly fine. They talked about the weather, about Ian's journey to the studio, about how lovely it was to see him again. The audience at home was settling in with their morning tea, expecting nothing more than a delightful chat with one of Britain's finest actors. But then Lorraine shifted the conversation. Her tone changed. Her smile became a bit tighter. And that's when things started to go very, very wrong. "So, Ian," Lorraine said, leaning forward with a look that suggested she was about to say something important, "I have to ask you about something that's been causing quite a stir lately. There's been a lot of talk about your views on certain casting decisions in the theater world." Ian's expression flickered. Just for a moment, his warm smile faltered. He knew exactly what she was referring to, and clearly, he hadn't expected it to come up like this. "What specifically are you referring to, Lorraine?" he asked, his voice still polite but with an edge that hadn't been there before. Lorraine didn't back down. "Well, you've been quite vocal about your belief that gay actors should play gay roles, straight actors should play straight roles. Some people are saying that's rather limiting, isn't it? That it goes against what acting is actually about." The studio suddenly felt different. The friendly atmosphere had evaporated. Ian sat up straighter on the sofa, his hands clasped together. You could see him choosing his words very carefully. "I think you're misrepresenting what I've said," Ian replied, his voice measured but firm. "What I've advocated for is that gay actors should have the opportunity to play gay roles because for decades we were shut out of those parts entirely. Straight actors played us, often as stereotypes or jokes. I've never said straight actors can't play gay characters." Lorraine jumped back in, not giving him much room to breathe. "But you have said that it's more authentic when gay actors play gay roles, haven't you? Isn't that the same thing?" "No, Lorraine, it isn't the same thing at all," Ian said, and now there was definite frustration in his voice. "And I'm surprised you don't understand the difference." That last comment landed like a slap. Lorraine's expression changed immediately. Her media-trained smile disappeared, replaced by something much harder. "I understand perfectly well, Ian," she shot back, her Scottish accent becoming more pronounced. "What I'm questioning is whether this kind of thinking is helpful to anyone. You're creating divisions where there don't need to be any." Ian shook his head slowly. "No, Lorraine, the divisions already exist. They've existed for my entire career. I'm simply talking about leveling the playing field." "But surely," Lorraine pressed on, "acting is about pretending to be someone you're not. That's the entire job. Should we only have actual murderers play murderers? Should only real doctors play doctors?" It was a gotcha question, the kind designed to make Ian look ridiculous if he disagreed, and you could see in his face that he recognized it for exactly what it was. "That's a ridiculous comparison, and you know it," Ian said sharply. "Being gay isn't the same as being a murderer, and the fact that you'd even make that parallel is frankly offensive." The temperature in the studio had gone from warm to absolutely freezing. Lorraine's face flushed red. Members of the crew behind the cameras were exchanging worried glances. This was going completely off the rails, and everyone knew it. "I didn't mean it like that," Lorraine said defensively, though her tone suggested she was getting angry now too. "But you're being deliberately difficult, Ian." "Am I?" Ian replied, his voice rising slightly. Or am I simply refusing to let you twist my words into something they're not? I'm not twisting anything, Lorraine snapped. I'm asking legitimate questions that a lot of people want answers to. No, Ian said firmly. You're trying to create controversy where there isn't any. You invited me here to talk about my work in the theater, and instead, you're ambushing me with poorly thought-out questions about identity politics that you clearly haven't bothered to research properly. Oh, that stung. You could see it written all over Lorraine's face. She wasn't used to guests calling her out like this, especially not on live television with millions of people watching. I have researched it, Lorraine insisted, her voice tight. And what I've found is that you've made comments that a lot of people find divisive and exclusionary. A lot of people? Ian repeated, eyebrows raised. Or a lot of people, according to your production team, who wanted to create a dramatic moment for your show. Direct hit. Lorraine's mouth opened and closed. She looked briefly at someone off camera, possibly a producer, and when she turned back to Ian, her expression had hardened even more. That's completely unfair, she said coldly. Is it? Ian challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you decided before I even walked in here what kind of interview this was going to be. The tension was unbearable now. These two weren't just having a disagreement anymore. This was turning into a proper fight. The kind where both parties had stopped caring about being polite and were now just trying to land blows. Lorraine took a breath, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Ian, I think you're being overly sensitive about this. Wrong thing to say. Completely wrong thing to say. Ian's eyes flashed with genuine anger. Overly sensitive? Lorraine, I'm 75 years old. I lived through Section 28. I couldn't be openly gay for the first half of my career without risking everything. I've fought for decades for basic dignity and representation, and you're sitting there telling me I'm being overly sensitive when I talk about these issues? His voice had risen now, not shouting, but projecting in that way that trained actors can. Every word was crystal clear, cutting through the studio like a knife. Lorraine wasn't backing down, though. If anything, she was doubling down. And I respect all of that, Ian, I really do. But you can't expect to say controversial things and then be immune from criticism. Controversial? Ian repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. Wanting fair opportunities for gay actors is controversial now? When you frame it the way you have been, yes, Lorraine shot back. You're essentially saying that straight actors are taking roles away from gay actors. That's divisive. They literally have been for decades. Ian's voice was properly raised now. That's not an opinion, Lorraine. That's a historical fact. Well, maybe that's changed now, Lorraine said dismissively. Maybe you need to move on from the past. The studio went dead silent. Even the crew members who'd been whispering amongst themselves stopped. That comment had crossed the line, and everyone knew it. Ian stared at Lorraine for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that's somehow more powerful than shouting. Move on from the past? That's your response? Just forget about decades of discrimination and pretend everything's fine now? That's not what I meant. Lorraine started, but Ian cut her off. No, that's exactly what you meant. You want me to shut up about these issues because they make you uncomfortable. Because it's easier for you if people like me just smile and talk about our theater shows and don't mention anything difficult or challenging. Ian, you're putting words in my mouth, Lorraine protested. I'm repeating the words that came out of your mouth, Ian fired back. You just told me to move on from the past. How exactly am I supposed to interpret that? Lorraine's face was bright red now. She was losing control of the interview completely, and she knew it. And rather than trying to de-escalate, she made the catastrophic decision to escalate further. Maybe I'm suggesting that constantly playing the victim isn't helpful to anyone, she said sharply. The gasps from the crew were audible. Someone off camera actually said, "Oh my God," loud enough to be heard. This had gone from a heated discussion to a complete disaster in the space of one sentence. Ian's face went pale. He sat perfectly still for a moment, and then slowly, deliberately, he reached up and removed his microphone. Playing the victim? He said quietly, his voice shaking slightly with anger. Playing the victim? He stood up from the sofa, the microphone pack still in his hand. Lorraine, I came here this morning in good faith. I thought we were going to have a pleasant conversation about theater, about art, about the things I love. Instead, You've ambushed me with loaded questions, twisted my words, dismissed my lived experience, and now you've just accused me of playing the victim." Lorraine stood up too, suddenly seeming to realize how badly this had all gone wrong. "Ian, please sit down. Let's talk about this." "No," Ian said firmly. "I don't think we have anything more to talk about. You've made your position very clear." "Ian, you're being ridiculous," Lorraine said. And that was the final straw. "Ridiculous?" Ian's voice rose again. "I'm being ridiculous for having the audacity to be offended when you tell me to move on from discrimination? When you accuse me of playing the victim after I've spent my entire life fighting for basic rights?" He turned to walk off the set, but Lorraine called after him. "If you walk off now, you're just proving my point." Ian stopped and turned back around. "What point would that be exactly, Lorraine? That I won't sit here and be insulted on live television? Yes, you're absolutely right about that. I won't." "This is very unprofessional," Lorraine said, her voice tight with anger. Ian actually laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Unprofessional? You invite me onto your show, ambush me with hostile questions, dismiss my entire life's experience, accuse me of playing the victim, and I'm the one being unprofessional?" "I'm just asking questions," Lorraine insisted. "No, you're not," Ian said firmly. "You're attacking me. There's a difference. And I'm done pretending there isn't." The production team was in chaos. Cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of this meltdown. Someone was probably screaming in Lorraine's earpiece, telling her to fix this, to calm things down, to do something. But it was too late. This had spiraled completely out of control. "Ian, please." Lorraine tried one more time, and her voice had changed now. She sounded less angry and more desperate. She knew this was going to be everywhere by lunchtime, that this was going to be the thing people remembered about her show. "Just sit down and let's talk about your play." "That's what we should have done from the start." "Yes, it is what we should have done," Ian agreed. "But you chose differently, didn't you? You chose to go for the controversy, the drama, the headline. Well, congratulations, Lorraine. You got it." "That's not fair," Lorraine said weakly. "Isn't it?" Ian challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, you knew exactly what you were doing. You prepared those questions. You decided to push and push and push, and now you're surprised that I'm not willing to sit here and take it." He started walking off the set again, his expensive shoes clicking on the studio floor. "Where are you going?" Lorraine called after him, her voice rising. Ian didn't even turn around. "I'm leaving, Lorraine. I'm walking off your show because I have too much respect for myself to stay somewhere I'm clearly not respected." "You can't just walk off," Lorraine shouted. Ian stopped at the edge of the set and turned around one final time. "Yes, I can. Watch me." "This is incredibly rude," Lorraine tried. "You know what's rude?" Ian's voice echoed through the studio. "Inviting someone onto your show under false pretenses, ambushing them with hostile questions, dismissing their life experience, telling them to move on from decades of discrimination, accusing them of playing the victim. That's rude, Lorraine. That's incredibly, profoundly rude. Me leaving? That's just self-respect." Lorraine's face was a mixture of anger and panic now. "If you walk out that door, you're never coming back on this show." Ian actually smiled at that. "Lorraine, after this morning, wild horses couldn't drag me back onto this show. You've shown me exactly who you are and what you think of people like me." Message received loud and clear. "I never said anything about people like you," Lorraine protested. "You didn't have to," Ian said quietly. "Every question you asked, every dismissive comment, every time you tried to minimize my experience, it said everything that needed to be said." He turned to leave again. "You're being a coward," Lorraine shouted, and that made Ian stop dead in his tracks. The entire studio held its breath. The crew were frozen. The cameras kept rolling. And Ian McKellen slowly turned around one last time. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, but absolutely seething with anger. "A coward? Lorraine, I came out publicly in 1988, when doing so could have destroyed my career completely. I've spent decades fighting for LGBTQ rights when it was deeply unpopular and often dangerous. I've used my platform to advocate for people who don't have one. I've faced hatred, discrimination, and threats. And you're calling me a coward because I won't sit here and let you insult me on live television?" Lorraine opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She'd finally realized she'd gone too far, but it was far too late to take it back now. I've been called many things in my life, Lorraine, but a coward? Never. And I'm certainly not going to start accepting that label from someone who's built a career on safe, comfortable morning television and has never had to fight for anything the way I have. That hit home. You could see it in Lorraine's face. She looked genuinely hurt by that comment, but she'd brought this on herself. That's a horrible thing to say, she said, her voice cracking slightly. Is it? Ian replied. Is it any more horrible than anything you've said to me this morning? Because I don't think so. I think it's just the truth. And sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, Lorraine. Sometimes it challenges us. Sometimes it makes us angry. But that doesn't make it any less true. He adjusted his jacket, straightened his tie, and looked directly into the camera. To anyone watching at home who's ever been told to move on from discrimination, who's ever been accused of playing the victim when they speak up about injustice, who's ever been dismissed when they try to share their experience, please know that you're not alone. You're not being too sensitive. You're not being difficult. You're standing up for yourself. And that's one of the most important things you can do. Then he looked back at Lorraine one last time. Goodbye, Lorraine. I wish I could say it's been a pleasure, but I don't think either of us would believe that. And with that, Sir Ian McKellen walked off the set, through the studio door, and disappeared from view. Lorraine stood there in silence for a moment, her face pale now instead of red. The studio was absolutely silent. And then someone off camera must have told her to say something, anything, because she suddenly turned to the camera with a forced smile. Well, that was unexpected, she said, her voice shaky. We'll be right back after this break. The cameras cut away, but not before capturing the look of absolute devastation on Lorraine Kelly's face. She knew what had just happened. She knew this was going to be everywhere. She knew that she'd completely misjudged the situation and pushed one of Britain's most beloved actors too far. In the hallway outside the studio, Ian McKellen was already being approached by concerned producers, asking him if he was all right, if there was anything they could do. He politely but firmly declined to speak to them, collected his coat from his dressing room, and walked straight out of the building. Back in the studio, Lorraine was having a heated conversation with her producers during the commercial break. Her voice could be heard raised in anger, though whether she was angry at them or at herself wasn't entirely clear. When the show came back from break, she'd composed herself enough to continue, but there was a shakiness to her voice that hadn't been there before. She didn't mention Ian again. She didn't try to explain what had happened or defend her position. She just moved on to the next segment, pretending that the previous 15 minutes hadn't completely derailed her show. But everyone knew. The viewers at home knew. The crew knew. And most importantly, Lorraine Kelly knew that she'd made a catastrophic error in judgment that morning. What should have been a pleasant conversation with a legendary actor had turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. And it was all captured on camera. Every painful second of it, ready to be replayed and analyzed and discussed for days to come. Sir Ian McKellen had walked onto that set in good faith, expecting nothing more than a friendly chat about theater and art. He'd walked off that set having been ambushed, insulted, and dismissed. And he'd done so with his dignity intact, his head held high, and his principles uncompromised. As he left the building and stepped out into the morning sunlight, Ian McKellen took a deep breath and smiled slightly to himself. He'd stood up for himself. He'd refused to be diminished or dismissed. He'd walked away rather than compromise his values for the sake of television entertainment. And somewhere in that studio, Lorraine Kelly was learning a very hard lesson about the dangers of underestimating your guests and mistaking kindness for weakness.